The plane had been in the air for a while, the steady hum of the engines creating a rhythm that passengers began to relax into. Outside, the clouds drifted slowly, their shapes shifting and moving like waves in a silent ocean. Inside, the cabin was quieter than before, most travelers settling into their seats with blankets, books, or the occasional conversation. The woman in seat 20D remained calm, observing the world around her with quiet awareness. Her eyes followed small movements, a child tugging gently at a parent's hand, a businessman organizing papers on his tray, a young traveler adjusting headphones, each gesture telling a story that she noticed and reflected upon without intrusion. She took a deep breath and shifted slightly in her seat, feeling the subtle vibration of the aircraft beneath her. It was not uncomfortable. It was familiar, almost comforting, like the steady pulse of a routine. Her hands rested lightly on her notebook, a small collection of blank pages she carried with her. Every now and then she wrote down a thought, a fleeting observation or a small reflection on what she saw and experienced. The pages were neat and deliberate, a mirror of her composed and thoughtful nature. She did not write for anyone else. It was her personal way of engaging with the world, quiet yet attentive. Nearby, a young child whispered to a parent about the clouds outside the window. The mother smiled softly and tried to explain, her words calm and reassuring. The woman in 20D noticed this brief exchange and offered a faint, understanding smile. It was not meant for the child or the mother to see. Just a subtle acknowledgement, a recognition of the shared human experience. Around her, passengers continued their own routines. Some slept lightly, some watched screens, some spoke softly. She observed everything with careful attention, the ordinary details of life aboard a plane unfolding before her eyes. The flight attendants moved along the aisle, offering drinks and checking on passengers. One of them paused for a moment near seat 20D, glancing at her in passing. There was something familiar about her, a quiet aura that stood out without any effort. The attendant's eyes flicked away quickly, unsure if she had simply imagined it. But there was an unmistakable feeling that this passenger was different, someone significant. The woman noticed the brief glance but did not react. Her calm presence was deliberate and natural, grounded in self-possession and quiet observation. Hours into the flight, the captain's voice came over the intercom with updates on the altitude, flight path, and estimated arrival time. Passengers nodded or murmured in acknowledgement, some barely listening, others catching a few details. The woman listened politely, internalizing the information without any outward reaction. She returned her gaze to the window, watching the vast expanse of clouds below and then to the cabin, noting the subtle interactions and gestures among passengers. She observed not only what people did, but how they did it. A nervous glance here, a soft smile there, a fleeting gesture of kindness or frustration. A minor turbulence rattled the plane, causing a few murmurs of surprise and concern. A man nearby instinctively tightened his grip on the armrest, and a young woman clutched her blanket. The woman in 20D remained perfectly calm, adjusting her seat slightly and observing the reactions of those around her. She did not need to comfort anyone directly, but her composed presence seemed to influence the nearby passengers subtly. They noticed her lack of anxiety, a quiet reassurance that things were under control, and it had a calming effect. She took a sip of water, careful not to draw attention, and opened her notebook again. Her handwriting was neat and deliberate, each word chosen with care. She wrote about the flight, the people, the patterns she noticed, and the small stories unfolding around her. Writing was a tool for understanding the world, a way to process experiences while remaining fully present. She made occasional pauses, observing passengers or looking out the window at the sky, recording in her mind what she might later put on paper. The cabin crew continued their rounds, moving with practiced ease. One attendant glanced again at seat 20D, feeling a strange sense of recognition though she could not place it. Something about the woman was different, a quiet authority that drew attention without demanding it. The attendant returned to her tasks, careful not to let the thought distract her, but she could not help glancing one more time. The woman smiled faintly in acknowledgement of the subtle attention, though not directed at her specifically, maintaining a steady, composed presence that was at once ordinary and remarkable. Passengers shifted in their seats, some dozing lightly, some talking quietly to companions. The woman observed the subtle gestures of care and frustration, the way people managed their space in the confined area, and the small kindnesses that often went unnoticed. She noticed the nervous tapping of a hand, the comforting pat on a child's shoulder, the brief shared laughter over a shared observation. She did not comment or intervene unless necessary, simply absorbing the patterns of human behavior with deep, thoughtful attention. Outside, the sun began its slow descent, casting golden light through the windows. The clouds glowed softly and the shadows shifted across the plain. She watched the changing colors and shapes with quiet appreciation, noticing how light and shadow danced across the surfaces of the cabin and the passengers around her. There was a rhythm to it, a subtle order in the movement of time and light that she appreciated deeply. Every detail seemed significant, every small observation a thread in the fabric of the journey. At one point, a passenger spilled a drink, and the flight attendant quickly moved to assist. The woman noticed the gentle care and efficiency, the way the attendant reassured the passenger and cleaned the spill. She observed the patience, the calm attention to detail, and the small gestures that created order in minor disruptions. These moments were ordinary in appearance but rich in human meaning, and she recorded them in her mind and notebook with the same quiet attention she gave everything else. The hours continued, marked by the soft rhythm of engines, the occasional announcement, and the quiet interactions among passengers and crew. She remained attentive, observing patterns, human behaviors, and moments of connection. She noticed how people managed discomfort, how they sought reassurance, how they expressed gratitude in small ways. Every detail mattered, every subtle movement or glance contributing to her understanding of the human stories around her. As the flight progressed, she reflected briefly on her own thoughts, connecting observations with personal insights. She considered the fleeting kindnesses, the small struggles, the moments of tension and relief. She reflected on how ordinary human interactions could reveal resilience, empathy, and understanding in ways often overlooked. Her reflections were not judgmental but quietly analytical, allowing her to make sense of the world around her while remaining fully immersed in it. The sun set fully, leaving a warm, dim glow in the cabin. Passengers began to adjust for rest, some closing their eyes, some using headphones, and others quietly speaking to companions. The woman in 20D maintained her calm posture, alternating between writing in her notebook and observing quietly. She noticed the subtle exhaustion in some travelers, the relief in others, and the quiet patience that carried the flight forward. She did not intervene but absorbed the environment, internalizing every small detail with composed awareness. Toward the middle of the flight, a minor announcement interrupted the calm. The crew reminded passengers to keep their seatbelts fastened as turbulence was expected. Some passengers stiffened in concern, but she remained entirely composed, adjusting her seatbelt without any visible worry. Her calmness served as an invisible anchor, a quiet example of control in an otherwise uncertain moment. She observed how others reacted. Some fidgeted, some whispered, some tried to distract themselves with books or screens. Every response was noted, a reflection of human nature in a shared space. The flight attendants continued their attentive work, offering assistance and responding to questions. One of them glanced at 20D again, a sense of awe evident but unspoken. The woman remained polite and composed, never drawing attention, never seeking acknowledgement. Her presence had an impact that was subtle yet undeniable, a quiet authority that influenced the energy of those around her. It was remarkable, not in loud or dramatic ways, but in her steady, calm engagement with the world. Hours passed quietly, each moment blending into the next. The plane moved steadily through the sky, clouds shifting below, sunlight reflecting faintly. She continued to observe and write, her attention both outward and inward, taking note of patterns, gestures, and interactions. The ordinary became extraordinary under her watchful eye, and the ordinary flight transformed into a subtle study of human behavior, awareness, and empathy. And as the plane continued its journey, the woman in seat 20D remained composed, attentive, and quietly remarkable, a calm center in the flow of human activity. Every small observation, every fleeting gesture, added depth to the story of the flight, creating a rich tapestry of ordinary moments seen through extraordinary awareness. Her presence went largely unnoticed, yet it shaped the atmosphere in ways that few passengers or crew could articulate, leaving an invisible mark on the journey that would remain long after the flight ended. The flight had passed the midpoint, and the atmosphere in the cabin had subtly changed. The crew maintained their usual professionalism, but their awareness of the passenger in seat 20D created a quiet tension. In the cockpit, the captain and co-pilot exchanged brief glances, each subtle movement and word carrying more weight than usual. They were focused on the technicalities of the flight, of course, but now their awareness extended beyond the instruments to the presence of someone extraordinary among their passengers. Every routine check, every shift of controls, was executed with care that balanced safety and respect for the remarkable woman they knew was in seat 20D. In the cabin, the woman remained composed and calm, her notebook resting in her lap. She occasionally wrote down observations, each note careful and precise, capturing the small details of life around her. She noticed the way a passenger adjusted their bag to make space for another, the quiet assistance of a fellow traveler helping someone retrieve a fallen item, and the soft reassurances exchanged among children and parents. Her attention was unintrusive yet deliberate, capturing moments of ordinary human kindness that often went unnoticed. Flight attendants moved down the aisles, offering water, blankets, and gentle guidance. One attendant paused near 20D, noticing her calm, composed presence. There was something remarkable about the way she carried herself, unassuming yet commanding a quiet attention. The attendant offered a polite smile, and the woman returned it with a soft nod, acknowledging the gesture without creating a spectacle. Around her, passengers continued their routines, largely unaware of the subtle influence her presence had on the cabin's energy. The co-pilot in the cockpit leaned slightly toward the captain and whispered a reminder about the altitude, adjustments, and upcoming weather patterns. Their communication was precise, quiet, and measured. Both pilots understood the delicate balance of responsibility in their hands, now magnified by the awareness of who sat among their passengers. Each action, each instruction, each check became part of a careful choreography that ensured not just safety, but comfort and respect for the extraordinary passenger in 20D. Outside, the sunlight shifted, casting soft golden beams across the clouds and illuminating the cabin. The woman looked briefly out the window, observing the landscape with quiet appreciation, and then returned her gaze to the small human dramas unfolding around her. She watched a father gently calm a restless child, a passenger discreetly offering a book to a neighbor, and another quietly reorganizing belongings to make the shared space comfortable. She absorbed these interactions with thoughtful attention, noticing how ordinary gestures created a sense of shared humanity. A slight turbulence passed, and a few passengers instinctively adjusted their posture, gripping armrests or tightening seatbelts. The woman in 20D remained entirely composed, adjusting slightly and watching the reactions of those around her. Her calm presence had an invisible effect, subtly reassuring those nearby without a word or gesture meant for them. The ripple of her composure carried through the cabin, making the moment less tense than it might otherwise have been. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the sun continued its descent, creating a warm and tranquil ambiance. The woman opened her notebook again, jotting down reflections and details with precise attention. Each note was brief yet detailed, capturing the flow of life around her. She observed the way a traveler's shoulders relaxed when offered help, the gentle pat a parent gave a child's hand, the quiet focus of someone reading or writing. In these ordinary moments she found meaning, and her writing became a quiet record of human behavior and empathy. The crew continued to navigate the flight with their heightened awareness. They moved with careful efficiency, attentive to every detail of the cabin and each passenger's experience. The knowledge of the woman in 20D added a layer of consideration to each decision, no matter how minor. Every routine task, checking seatbelts, offering assistance, ensuring calm in the cabin, was performed with subtle mindfulness. In their professionalism, a quiet respect for her presence was evident, though it remained entirely unspoken. A passenger accidentally dropped a magazine, and a nearby traveler instinctively reached to help. The woman observed the brief exchange, noting the kindness and attentiveness involved. She smiled faintly, not for the participants to see, but as a silent acknowledgement of the small act of human cooperation. Every minor gesture carried significance. Every moment was a small story in the tapestry of the flight, and she noticed them all with deliberate awareness. Hours passed, marked by the gentle hum of the engines, occasional announcements, and the soft interactions of passengers and crew. She remained present, attentive, and reflective, The ordinary details, fidgeting hands, whispered reassurances, shifting positions, shared smiles, became a rich landscape for observation. She did not interfere unnecessarily. She simply absorbed, noted, and reflected, creating a mental record of the quiet flow of life around her. The co-pilot adjusted controls smoothly, his eyes occasionally flicking to the passenger list and then toward the cabin. The captain maintained a steady focus on the instruments, their shared awareness a silent agreement to maintain precision while honoring the presence of Seat 20D. Their professionalism never wavered, but an added layer of mindfulness shaped every movement, word, and decision. They were guardians not just of safety but of comfort and dignity, fully aware of the weight of the passenger's presence. As the flight moved forward, the woman continued her quiet observations. She noticed patterns, the way passengers anticipated each other's needs, the small gestures of patience, the moments of laughter or concern. She recorded these mental notes carefully, appreciating the subtle connections that existed among strangers sharing a confined space. Every interaction, every minor act of kindness or frustration, added depth to her understanding of human nature and the complex dance of social behavior in a shared environment. A minor disturbance occurred when a bag slipped slightly from an overhead compartment. A flight attendant moved quickly, helping to secure it, while another passenger offered assistance. The woman noticed the collaborative effort, the calmness with which it was handled, and the unspoken communication among those involved. She returned to her notebook briefly, writing a few lines, then observed the rest of the cabin, appreciating the quiet coordination that kept the environment stable and comfortable. The sun lowered further, painting the clouds and cabin in soft shades of orange and pink. The woman glanced out the window, absorbing the colors, the shapes, and the subtle movement of light across the plain. She returned her gaze to the cabin, noting the interplay of shadows and the quiet gestures of passengers and crew. Each small moment, though ordinary, was layered with meaning and connection, a story unfolding that she quietly recorded in her mind. Flight attendants made another round, checking on passengers, offering drinks, and ensuring comfort. One approached 20D and paused, sensing the composed, calm presence of the woman. There was a fleeting sense of recognition, though nothing was verbalized. The woman offered a polite, quiet nod, acknowledging the attention without drawing focus. The subtle influence of her presence shaped the cabin's energy, providing calm, reassurance, and quiet order in an environment that was otherwise routine and ordinary. As the hours wore on, the plane continued its journey through the sky. Passengers shifted, some dozing lightly, some engaged in soft conversation, some absorbed in reading or personal devices. She observed everything with a steady, calm awareness, noting patterns of behavior, moments of empathy, and the ordinary ways people adapted to their environment. Her presence was quiet, unassuming, yet profoundly grounding, influencing the rhythm and energy of the cabin without drawing attention to herself. The co-pilot whispered a small reminder about the upcoming weather patterns, and the captain responded with a nod, adjusting the instruments accordingly. Their movements were precise, deliberate, and mindful. Both understood that this flight carried a significance beyond the ordinary, and their attention to detail reflected not only professional duty, but also an unspoken respect for the passenger in 20D. Every announcement, every adjustment, and every word carried that subtle weight. She returned to her writing once more, capturing reflections on what she observed, the quiet patience of passengers, the small gestures of cooperation, the subtle ways people maintained comfort and connection. Each detail was a thread in the larger tapestry of human interaction, and she recorded it with thoughtful care. Occasionally, she looked out the window, appreciating the changing sky, then returned her attention to the cabin where the ordinary yet remarkable flow of life continued. The flight pressed on, each mile marking progress through the sky. The woman in seat 20D remained calm, attentive, and quietly influential. Her presence was both ordinary and extraordinary, unnoticed by most, but shaping the environment in subtle, profound ways. Observations, reflections, and small gestures created a rich landscape of human experience, making the journey more than just a passage from one place to another. It became a quiet study of awareness, empathy, and the ordinary connections that define shared human life. The day began like any other for most people heading to the airport. There was the usual rush of travelers dragging suitcases and checking flight times, while airport staff moved efficiently through the bustling terminals. Among these travelers, the woman who would later sit in seat 20D moved with quiet purpose. She carried a small bag over her shoulder and a modest suitcase in her hand. Her steps were calm and measured, and she seemed to notice everything around her without appearing distracted. The world of the airport, the announcements, the noise, the constant motion, was something she observed closely but did not allow to disturb her inner calm. She walked through security with ease, calmly placing her belongings on the conveyor belt and following all the necessary procedures. The security personnel barely gave her a second glance. She looked like any other traveler, ordinary in appearance yet somehow composed in a way that made her stand out if one paid attention. She retrieved her items with quiet efficiency and moved toward the gate, her gaze occasionally lifting to observe the flow of people around her. Travelers hurried by, some with nervous energy, some chatting casually, some lost in their own thoughts. She moved among them like a calm center, unaffected by the rush and noise. At the gate, she found a quiet spot to wait. She did not have the need to sit immediately but preferred to stand, watching people settle into their seats, some reading, some working on laptops, some talking softly. She took note of the little things, the way a mother adjusted her child's blanket, the small acts of courtesy that people extended to each other without thinking. Occasionally, she pulled out a small notebook and jotted down observations, each note precise and deliberate. It was a habit she had cultivated over the years, a way to make sense of the world and capture the moments that often go unnoticed. The boarding announcement came, and she joined the line in orderly fashion. There was no rush, no unnecessary pushing or shoving, just a quiet patience that seemed to set the tone for those around her. As she presented her boarding pass and identification, she did so with a polite smile, acknowledging the airline staff without lingering. The staff returned the gesture with professionalism, unaware of the extraordinary significance this passenger held. As she walked down the jet bridge and entered the plane, she noticed the familiar sounds and smells of air travel, the faint hum of engines, the scent of recycled air, the quiet murmurs of passengers finding their seats. She moved with calm confidence, placing her carry-on luggage in the overhead compartment and settling into seat 20D. The seat was comfortable, but she adjusted it slightly, finding the perfect position to maintain ease and focus. She did not appear rushed or anxious, just attentive and aware. Around her, passengers settled in their own routines. A young child fidgeted with a tablet. A business traveler adjusted papers and a laptop, and a few people quietly chatted with companions. She observed these small interactions with subtle interest, noting the gestures and expressions that revealed personality and emotion. Each person told a story, and she noticed without judgment, simply observing with the calm, gentle awareness that had become a part of her nature. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, and she followed along with quiet attention. Every instruction, every movement was observed and processed, though she had already flown many times before. She did not need to repeat actions unnecessarily, but remained fully engaged, a model of polite attention that even casual observers would have found reassuring. There was a small air of composure about her that seemed to influence the mood of the nearby passengers. Some instinctively relaxed a little more, their shoulders dropping as if her calm had been contagious. As the plane taxied toward the runway, the engines hummed steadily, vibrating lightly through the cabin floor. She glanced out the window, watching the airport fade behind her as the plane began its ascent. There was a gentle serenity in the way she observed the world below, noting the colors, shapes, and movements of the ground, the other planes, and the surrounding scenery. Her calm gaze and composed posture seemed to anchor the immediate area around her, even as other passengers fidgeted or adjusted themselves in anticipation of takeoff. Once the plane was in the air and cruising steadily, she settled more fully into her seat. She pulled out her notebook once again, pen in hand, and began to write. She wrote about what she observed, the passengers around her, the subtle movements, the interactions that happened in quiet and almost unnoticed ways. She noted the gestures that revealed patience, kindness, tension, or humor. Her writing was methodical, her observations clear and deliberate, a reflection of her deep engagement with the human stories unfolding around her. Occasionally, she paused to look out the window, watching the clouds drift by and the colors of the sky change as the sun moved across it. She was aware of the beauty in these ordinary moments, not needing dramatic events to capture attention. The flight, the journey itself, the human interactions within it, all were rich with meaning for her. She absorbed every detail, a silent participant in the collective experience of travel. Nearby passengers began to doze, some lost in thought, some watching in-flight entertainment, and some quietly chatting. She noticed how people adapted to their surroundings, the little routines that helped them feel comfortable and secure. She observed without judgment, appreciating the resilience and small acts of consideration that make shared spaces like airplanes work smoothly. Her awareness was not intrusive, but it was thorough, capturing the essence of human behavior in a confined environment. As hours passed, the routine of the flight continued. Flight attendants moved down the aisles, offering drinks and checking on passengers. Each interaction she noticed, from the way an attendant politely assisted a passenger to the careful attention of a traveler helping a neighbor with their luggage. She recorded these moments mentally, adding them to the quiet tapestry of observations she was building. Every detail, no matter how small, contributed to her understanding of the complex and subtle patterns of human behavior. She remained composed, not seeking attention or acknowledgement, yet her calm presence seemed to influence the nearby passengers. Some instinctively relaxed more, drawn into a shared rhythm of quiet composure that made the flight feel smoother and more comfortable. She was aware of the energy around her and adjusted her own movements subtly to maintain harmony. A quiet example of mindfulness in an otherwise ordinary environment. Throughout the flight, she maintained a balance between observation, reflection, and participation. She observed passengers and crew alike, noting interactions, gestures, and the small rhythms that define human behavior in shared spaces. She wrote down reflections when appropriate, paused to observe the sky, and maintained her composure with a quiet dignity that did not demand attention but naturally inspired it. She was a calm, steady presence, fully engaged with the world around her yet entirely at ease within herself. The hours passed uneventfully, each moment adding to the rich tapestry of the journey. She noticed everything, from the subtle gestures of a parent comforting a child to the quiet efficiency of a flight attendant performing duties. Each interaction, each observation, added depth to her experience, though it remained largely invisible to others. To them, she was simply a passenger, quiet and composed. Yet those who observed closely might sense the extraordinary calm and awareness she brought to the space. As the plane continued its journey, the woman in seat 20D remained attentive and composed, a quiet observer and participant in the ordinary yet intricate ballet of human behavior that unfolded around her. She did not need to be recognized or celebrated. Her focus was on noticing, understanding, and reflecting. She wrote, watched, and absorbed the moments of ordinary life, weaving them into a mental record that captured the beauty, patience, and resilience of the human spirit. And so, the first part of the journey passed in calm observation and quiet engagement. She was seated in 20D, ordinary in appearance but extraordinary in presence, setting the stage for what would come next. Every movement, every glance, every gesture around her was absorbed with deliberate care, and she continued to navigate the flight with the steady, composed attention that defined her character, marking the beginning of a journey that would be remembered by those who noticed the quiet significance she carried. The plane began its descent, and a quiet anticipation settled over the cabin. Passengers adjusted themselves, checked seatbelts, and glanced toward the windows as the world below came into view. The woman in seat 20D remained composed, her gaze steady yet observant. She noticed the subtle changes around her, the way some travelers shifted nervously, the soft murmurs of excitement, the occasional glance of curiosity toward the window. Her calmness seemed to gently influence those nearby, creating a small pocket of quiet amidst the bustle of preparation for landing. She reached for her notebook one last time during the flight. Her pen moved across the page, capturing observations and reflections from the journey. She wrote about the small gestures of kindness she had seen, the patience shown in cramped spaces, the fleeting moments of human connection that often went unnoticed. She noted how passengers adjusted for each other, helped when needed, or offered a comforting smile. Her writing was not for anyone else. It was her way of making sense of the world and preserving the ordinary beauty she witnessed. In the cockpit, the pilots worked with a focused precision. The awareness of who was in seat 20D added a silent weight to every action. They were careful, measured, and attentive, not only to the instruments but to the experience of the passengers. The captain adjusted the controls smoothly, maintaining a gentle descent, while the co-pilot kept a watchful eye on the cabin, aware of the significance of the passenger in 20D. Their professionalism combined with a quiet respect, a careful balance between duty and acknowledgement of the presence of someone extraordinary. As the plane moved lower, the cityscape came into view. Buildings, roads, parks, and rivers unfolded below in intricate detail, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. She watched with quiet appreciation, noting the movement of cars, the tiny figures of pedestrians, the patterns of everyday life that continued below the plane. Even in these ordinary sights, she found fascination and insight, the small details connecting with the broader story of human activity and resilience. Around her, passengers began to prepare for landing. Some folded blankets, others packed belongings, and a few exchanged final words or laughter with companions. She noticed the gestures of courtesy and cooperation, the way people made room for one another, offered help, or adjusted to the shared space. Even minor interactions like assisting someone with a fallen item or offering a smile to a neighbor were rich with human meaning. Her quiet attention turned these simple moments into something significant, capturing the essence of everyday human kindness. Flight attendants moved through the aisles one final time, checking seatbelts, reassuring nervous travelers, and maintaining a calm atmosphere. One attendant paused briefly near 20D, glancing at her with a hint of recognition and curiosity. The woman offered a polite nod, her expression serene and composed. There was nothing dramatic in her demeanor, yet her presence carried a quiet authority, a subtle influence that reached beyond what anyone could see. Even the briefest acknowledgement had a calming effect, as if those who came into contact with her instinctively felt steadier, more grounded. A slight bump of turbulence shook the plane as it neared the runway, causing a few passengers to grip their armrests. She adjusted her position slightly, observing the reactions around her. Some fidgeted, others whispered reassurances to their companions. Her calm, composed demeanor acted as an anchor, helping to ease the tension for those nearby. Without words or direct intervention, she radiated a quiet assurance that things were under control, and it subtly shaped the atmosphere of the cabin. The sun continued its descent, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The clouds below glowed softly, their edges illuminated in warm light. She watched the scene quietly, taking in the shifting patterns and reflections. The ordinary world outside the plane became extraordinary through her eyes, each small detail a note in the broader story of life unfolding beneath and around her. The simple beauty of light, shadow, and movement fascinated her, and she absorbed it fully, present and attentive. As the plane touched down smoothly on the runway, a collective sigh of relief passed through the cabin. Some passengers clapped lightly, others smiled in quiet satisfaction. She remained composed, observing the subtle reactions around her. People around her seemed more relaxed, subtly influenced by her steady presence. She did not celebrate, did not seek recognition, but her calm had been noticed by those sensitive to such things. Her quiet composure had helped shape a safer, gentler environment for everyone aboard. The plane taxied to the gate and the passengers began to prepare for disembarkation. The woman in 20D stayed seated for a moment longer, ensuring she had everything in order. Her attention remained deliberate and careful, checking her belongings, making sure nothing was left behind, and observing the final small interactions among passengers. Even in the seemingly mundane task of gathering belongings, she remained present and intentional, a model of mindfulness and composure. As the doors opened, passengers began to move forward, some eager to exit, others taking their time. She rose calmly, lifting her bag with ease and adjusting the strap over her shoulder. Her movements were fluid and intentional, reflecting a quiet confidence and poise. She passed through the aisle, exchanging small, polite gestures with fellow passengers and crew. Each nod, smile, or simple acknowledgement carried a quiet humanity, small yet meaningful, shaping the final moments of the journey for those who noticed. Once she exited the plane, she moved through the terminal with the same calm awareness that had defined her flight. The world continued around her, bustling with travelers, staff, and the constant hum of an airport in motion. Yet she walked with a quiet confidence, absorbing the ordinary yet fascinating details, the glances of people, the gestures of kindness, the interactions that shaped the environment. Her mind, always attentive, noted patterns, subtle connections, and the small ways people influenced one another without realizing it. In the taxi line outside, she waited patiently, observing the world around her. People hustled and hurried, some frustrated by delays, others content with the routine. She noticed the little things: a person holding a door for another, a child laughing at something small, a traveler adjusting a suitcase with care. Every moment carried significance in its subtlety, and she continued to observe without judgment, simply recording and reflecting silently. As the car drove her to her destination, she looked out the window, watching streets, trees, and people moving along their paths. Each detail mattered, each action was part of a broader story. She thought about the passengers she had observed on the flight, the small gestures of kindness, the moments of tension, the human resilience in ordinary circumstances. It all connected into a tapestry that she carried with her, a quiet understanding of the beauty in human life and shared experience. Finally, as she reached her destination, she gathered her belongings and stepped out into the world. The flight had ended, but the impressions and observations remained vivid in her mind. She walked forward calmly, aware of her surroundings, noticing the ordinary details that most people overlooked. Every interaction, every small moment of kindness or patience she had witnessed remained part of the story she had collected. Her presence had influenced those around her quietly, subtly, and profoundly, leaving an imprint that could not be measured but was undeniably felt. Even in departure, her story was one of composed observation, mindfulness, and quiet influence. She did not need recognition or applause, nor did she seek it. Her journey was both literal and figurative, a reflection of presence, empathy, and awareness. She had remained fully engaged with the world around her, noticing the small threads that connect human beings, appreciating the simple acts that make life meaningful. As she walked away from the airport, the woman in seat 20D carried with her the quiet strength and observation that had defined her flight. The passengers, crew, and staff she had interacted with or simply shared space with would remember a sense of calm, a subtle reassurance, and an unspoken attentiveness that made the ordinary journey extraordinary. And so the story concluded, not with fanfare, but with the quiet power of presence, observation, and the lasting impact of one composed individual in a shared human experience.